do you want to start? Okay. My name is Kate Lewis, and I am a co-chair of BRAG this year. The mission of BRAG, which is the Berkeley Research Administrators Group, is to provide a forum for collegial interaction in the research administration community. We do this by facilitating presentations by subject matter experts, like today, creating an environment to foster peer-to-peer exchanges, and seeking and sharing best practices. We first wanted to get started by introducing our newest Braggers steering committee members. So I'm going to allow them to introduce themselves. We'll start with Constanza.
Thank you. My name is Constanza. I am RA at Bros Region, and I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. Sarah?
Hi, everyone. Sarah Gogler. I know a lot of you people. Pronoun she, hers. I'm a contracts and grant supervisor, full cradle to grade, pre-post award RA in the Ursa region.
And Sonia, are you here?
I'm here. Hi, I'm Sonia Griffin. I'm an RA with the Share region.
And I believe Sanchita is not here. She's an RA cradle to grave with Urso, and she can introduce herself next time. So today we will hear from Alaisha Hellman and Brandon Amargo from our campus conflict of interest office. To let you know, we'll have Q&A at the end. We're going to set aside some time, and we prefer for questions to be at the end of the presentation. You can go ahead and enter them into the chat at any time. And if you would like to enter a confidential or anonymous question, you can send it to Sabina. And then I'd like to turn it over to Susan to introduce our speakers today.
I'm very happy to introduce Alaisha Hellman and Brandon Amargo. Alaisha is the Research Conflict of Interest Coordinator and the Campus Export Control Officer. She has worked in the Research Administration and Compliance Office since 2008. She is also proud to be a Berkeley graduate. Brandon Amargo is a Research Compliance Analyst at the Office of Research Administration and Compliance, and specifically works in the area of research conflict of interest and export controls. Prior to that, he worked at the Graduate Division at the UC Berkeley and was also program coordinator at UCSF. Brandon is also proud Berkeley graduate, and Brandon added when we were talking about it, he said, "Go Bears." So I'm going to turn it over to Alaisha and Brandon, and I'm going to make sure you guys can share your screen. Or at least I'm going to try. If you got it, you're in.
Great. I'll go ahead and, again, Alaisha. I know some people, the pronunciation, it is Alaisha, but I'm going to go ahead and Brandon's going to actually start us off for our presentation. And again, yes, questions at the end.
Sounds good. Thank you, Susan. Thank you to the steering committee for organizing this. It's really great to meet with you all. We gave a, oh, let me just check. Can everyone see the slides properly? Yep, great. So we gave a similar presentation to RAC Forum in June, but we are so happy to be with such a supportive group today. And hopefully this will give you some insight on what's going on. We have updated the slides, so we look forward to sharing them with you. So the interim policy seeks to ensure that DOE projects will be free from bias resulting from financial conflicts of interest or organizational conflicts of interest. The key takeaways are that this policy went into effect June 18th of this year, and it's very similar to the PHS policy. We provided a policy link on this slide, and also fresh off the press, we provided the FAQ link that was sent from DOE. So we hope that'll be helpful for people that are having to interface with this policy. The policy affects all funding opportunity announcements issued on or after June 18th, mods to FOAs on or after June 18th, and awards selected non-competitively on or after June 18th. The policy applies to federal financial assistance awards, grants, cooperative agreements. It includes both DOE and National Nuclear Security Administration, but does not include the labs. So that's one highlight for today. Here's the language that you'll see in an FOA. We wanted to document that on a slide for you. And then also the following slide here is the terms and conditions. Since this is recorded, you should be able to look back on this slide, and also on the RAC forum page, the slide should also be included in our June presentation. All right, moving forward, what does this policy require? The new policy requires, okay, so the initial disclosure period will cover the preceding 12 months, similar to PHS. PIs working on a project funded by the DOE are required to update the disclosure at least annually during the period of the award, and also within 30 days of discovering or acquiring a new significant financial interest. The DOE interim policy requires the principal investigator to complete COI training prior to engaging in projects related to any DOE financial assistance award, and at least every 4 years. UCOP has updated the ethics and compliance briefing for researchers training module, currently available in UC Learning Management System, in order to satisfy DOE's training. So the good news is that there's no new training module or additional training module. So what is disclosed? Significant financial interest is related to institutional responsibilities and includes much of what we see in PHS COI policy. So to quickly go over this, we are looking at receipt of income or other payment for services over the past 12 months from and/or equity interests in publicly traded entity totaling more than $5,000. Receipt of income or other payments for services over the past 12 months from a non-publicly traded entity totaling more than $5,000. And here's the key takeaway. A difference from, and this is different from publicly traded entity. This is any equity interest in a non-publicly traded entity, regardless of value. Furthermore, receipt of payments or any intellectual property rights and interests, for example, from patents assigned to any entity other than the regents totaling more than $5,000, and any amount of reimbursed or sponsored travel, and that excludes US governmental agencies and US institutions of higher education. What are institutional responsibilities? Oh, sorry. The interests related to institutional responsibilities are activities such as research, research consultation, teaching, professional practice, institutional committee memberships, and services on panels such as IRB or DSMB. So we've talked about SFI and institutional responsibilities. So what is not an SFI? So significant financial interests do not include salary, royalties, or other payment paid by UCB to the investigator if the investigator is currently employed or otherwise appointed by UCB. This includes intellectual property rights assigned to UCB and agreements to share in royalties related to such rights. Include income from seminars, lectures, teaching engagements, or services on advisory committees, or review panels sponsored by federal, state, or local government agencies of the United States, a domestic institution of higher education, or domestic research institute that is affiliated with the domestic institution of higher education. Income from investment vehicles such as mutual funds and retirement accounts, as long as the investigator does not directly control the investment decisions made in these vehicles. So what is unique about this policy? I will hand it over to Alaisha Hellman to continue on. Alaisha?
Sure. So it's interesting because some of the differences that we kind of seen is that they have given us a very broad definition of what a significant financial interest is. And they added, you know, that it could be a financial conflict of interest if it affects the design, conduct, or reporting or funding. And funding is new. So they're really trying to make sure that they're kind of capturing everything. And then they've also added in terms of like, you know, could it affect it's traditionally like for PHS, it was design, conduct, or reporting. Well, they've actually said or purpose. And they have the FAQs to actually kind of expand on that a little bit. And they explain that really that purpose is, does that, you know, the intent of why this project is happening. That's kind of really where they're saying. So anybody who could affect the design, conduct, reporting, or purpose, you know, that's where that financial conflict of interest would come into play. Okay, so next slide. All right, so yeah, so they also mentioned organizational conflict of interest. This is another thing that they've added. There's no de minimis for travel reporting, and then which was something I think they didn't realize that they may not have realized was in there, because I think they were copying NIH, and so I think they didn't realize that NIH had put in their FAQs that's where that 5,000 de minimis also applied to travel. And the same situation is actually with IP. They've not actually clarified that threshold. And another thing which is very interesting, and they also reiterated this in their FAQs, is they do have this very strongly worded certification, and it comes from DOJ, and it is required. And so this is something that obviously I think, based on some of the prosecutions that the DOJ has done against some professors that they had felt maybe were not being fully forthcoming, I think this provides them with stronger language in case that those situations arise and they do feel a need to prosecute. All right, so next. So this is actually that certification I was just mentioning. They, I think, make it really should, so make sure that the faculties who are signing this, that they understand that, they would have very little wiggle room to explain that they didn't understand when they've signed something like this, because, or if they've not, included everything, because really if something's not accurate, they really are signing this, and it would definitely put them in some legal jeopardy if something were to happen and they were not fully disclosing everything. All right, so the process. So it's very, similar to basically the PHS process, which, we've mentioned, and most of our other COI process. So again, we got to make sure that they have it before the award comes, that everything's been disclosed, that they're not releasing. So I do see somebody asked SFI. So SFI is a significant financial interest. So that's where that things where if it's non-publicly, it's like it's any equity, or if it's publicly traded, it's income over 5,000. That's technically what SFI is. That's a significant financial interest. So those are, sorry, our little COI acronyms. So once everything's been disclosed and approved, then we can spoke and release the award. They do have to disclose annually, and as Brandon mentioned, within 30 days. Subawards are also subject to the same requirements as well. And again, that specific language is required. All right, so again, this question, as usual process, they're gonna have that initial question in Phoebe. If it's yes, then they're gonna submit that DOE disclosure form. There will be the annual screening question that SPO will submit, asking about, have you added any investigators? Anybody have any new, financial interest that could have been added? And it is also have that annual requirement. And it is supposed to be, if there are any new significant financials, it really is supposed to be 30 days, and that would apply across the board for all of their awards that fall under the financial assistance. So next slide. So again, this is what you should be seeing in Phoebe for that DOE question. All right, next slide. And the form is on the website. Again, it is very similar to the PHS form. It just has those slight changes. And again, collected award stage annually. And then if they are disclosing things, that's when we do require the disclosure form. So we do have, if you guys haven't seen, we do have, when you go to the COI website, if you click on, federal, it used to just have like PHS, NIH, and NSF. Now there is a third column, which includes DOE, and it does have all of that information. So other agency highlights, let's see. So just a reminder, NIH policy, some of the things we see that it is, NIH does require a disclosure. So even if it's been determined unrelated, they still have to be disclosing if they still have that same financial interest. Sometimes we won't see new significant financial interests until they are disclosing it annually. But if they are getting those new significant financial interests, they're supposed to be disclosing those within 30 days on all projects. And so if you do see a faculty who is disclosing on one NIH project and not another, they probably made a mistake and should be disclosing on both of those. And you know, I think there's one other thing that I will also mention is with NIH is that, you know, Brandon discussed that institutional responsibilities. So we have seen where faculty, you know, are like, but, you know, this doesn't relate. And they really are trying to argue that. And I think in order to make a distinction that, you know, if it's a science field that's in, you know, in their, if it's generally in their science field, it really does relate. I think one of the things that, you know, an example I always give is I say, you know, unless like you own a restaurant, you're driving Uber on the weekends, you know, something like that, your Airbnb, your house in Tahoe, you know, those are things that do not relate to your institutional responsibilities, you know, but you being on a panel or being sitting, you know, on an advisory board, those are kind of things that do relate generally to your institutional responsibilities. And then another one also is, you know, and so they say like, oh, it's not related, I don't need to disclose it. Well, related or not, they do need to disclose it. And it's actually the COI committee who technically does make that relatedness determination. But, you know, obviously we understand, and, you know, that's why we have the forms, hopefully they can fill out and explain why they think it's unrelated. But even if it is unrelated, it truly is not related, they still have to fill out those forms. So these are things that, reminders that for you to share with your faculties. I don't know how much engagement you guys have on these discussions, but these are kind of things that we tend to see or questions that come up. And then, so for NSF, I will say, and, you know, granted, we are always on, we want everybody to disclose. We think it's very important that everybody disclose. It's, you know, it's very important. We believe in that open transparency. But I will say, so sometimes we see a lot of NSF where I think faculty are disclosing because they're not fully kind of reading. They think, oh, I have a significant financial interest, or SFI, and they think that, oh, well, I have this, therefore I need to be disclosing it, maybe like PHS. Well, so for NSF, and granted, I think they're going to be updating their PPG. I think I'm missing a letter in there. That they're going to be, yeah, thank you. Yes, that one, PPG. I think soon that, and this could change, but really what they're saying is you're really only supposed to be disclosing if that significant financial interest could affect the research being conducted, or, you know, where you have that financial interest could benefit or be affected by this research. So if you know, if the organization could be affected, or it could benefit the research, or vice, you know, the research could benefit them, or they could be benefited by the research. Those are things that's kind of that threshold. So very different from NIH, where there is that relatedness, you know, it doesn't matter if it's related or not, you have to disclose it. NSF does have that, where is it related? If it's related, yeah, then if it's significant and or related, and it's one of those, then they would fill out that form. So sometimes potentially your faculty are filling out forms that they actually don't need to be filling out. And so then now I think I am, you know, I just kind of gave you the DOE synopsis, wanted to kind of bring up some highlights of some of the ones we're seeing with PHS and NSF. So now we will open the floor to some questions. And I did see somebody ask about stuff within OATS. So OATS is a very different system. So there's kind of 3 levels of conflict of interest. There's the research conflict of interest, which is what our office handles. Then there's what the university refers to as conflict of commitment. And that's really handled by Academic Personnel Office, APO. And usually those are things that are handled within the department, and that's where OATS falls in. So OATS is that disclosure system where for faculty, and it's kind of one of those things, and I know you guys know all about effort reporting, right? You guys have to worry about effort reporting. So this is almost another like effort reporting check that happens at a higher level, but that also could potentially be for deans so that they can check like, hey, are students being involved as effectively involving students? So that's kind of what that OATS disclosure is they have like these different category levels where Sometimes they're reporting after the fact. Sometimes it does require approval. Like if the faculty wants to do research at a different institution, say over like summer salary, he's supposed to be getting approval from his dean, and that's a form that goes, approval, and then stuff goes into OATS. So really and we do sometimes check in OATS, and we do have access to OATS, but it is a distinct kind of disclosure system from ours. Now, what goes into OATS does not satisfy what we need for research conflict of interest. And so they are definitely two different systems. So if a faculty has that misconception that, oh, but I disclose this in OATS, that does not satisfy what their research disclosures are. And they should also note that usually what they're disclosing in their research are things that generally may end up going in their OATS disclosures. Sometimes, it's a category 3, they disclose it at the end of the year, but sometimes it is something that they should have potentially gotten prior approval for. And then the last conflict of interest, which doesn't really relate, is that there's that conflict of interest for senior management officials that I think they are required to fill out a form every year that discloses, if you're in a higher position of like authority of decision making, you have to disclose what your financials are to make sure that the university wants to know, so that you're not engaging in any relationships. But those are usually ones that we don't see, and probably none of us here would. If you are lucky enough to have that title or position, but I'm pretty sure none of us would have to see that kind of form. But so that's kind of where that distinction is conflict of commitment, conflict of interest, kind of the terms that we use for that. And conflict of commitments is that OATS system under APO, and the research conflict of interest, that's our office. So good question, and I appreciate that, because it is definitely something that I think the faculty are confused about. So, all right, what else we got? I know it's lunchtime, maybe you guys are chewing.
Oh, yes, hopefully people are having lunch, but please do mute yourself if you're not speaking. I have not received any direct questions from anyone yet, but if anyone have any questions, I see
Susan. Yeah,
I have one. So I not too long ago had a big proposal that I was working on, and the PI said yes to conflict of interest, and then he provided this huge table of all of his conflicts. And Alaisha, actually, I think I might have exchanged emails with you about it, and asked, like, does this suffice for his, what he's what his conflict of interests are, and he was supposed to fill out the form, and he didn't. And so I'm kind of wondering, and he's kind of high up in the so I'm wondering, like, I keep thinking about this, like, is this harmful if he doesn't fill it out until the award is issued, at which point he's probably going to have to fill it out again anyway, because a lot of the time it's like a year passes anyway.
So there's two things. So depending on the funder, so like NSF, you have to have submitted all your disclosures at proposal stage. So that's a risk right there.
Okay.
Same, and then another risk is then if he's waiting that long, it could be delayed because if he does have a financial interest that has to go to the committee meets once a month. So it's possible that it's going to get delayed even further because he did not submit it. Potentially if we had reviewed it earlier, like if he knew he was going to get funded, there was a good chance he's going to get funded. Usually that's when we always say, please disclose. We want to know as soon as possible. If you know you're going to get funded, put that in, because then, we can start that process, so that if it was already reviewed and it was time, like his annual, then potentially, unless he had new interests, we could then expedite the process, because we're like, okay, hey, this has already been reviewed, nothing's changed. Then traditionally the committee they say like, keep whatever we had decided. They aren't going to usually go back and change their mind. So, I think those are reasons. And then another thing to think about is, especially at that award stage, is that I talked about how, DOE has really put an emphasis on that disclosure statement and about requiring that signature. And they, they take that very seriously. So I think encouraging them to do that and disclose, I think, and I have to double check on the regs, but there's some, where it does require that those disclosures and that signature be at the proposal stage. So, I would suggest that, you really just encourage them to, just say, this is explain, policy. As I always say, it's usually there's a policy behind this. I don't want you to get in trouble. I don't want you to put your funding at risk or, even if it's not your funding's not at risk, what if, a public university, if somehow somebody were to have, access to this, and it could end up on the front of the New York Times kind of thing, especially if they are high profile. So I think, explaining these kind of things are, usually, I think things that I think faculty understand, and, like I say, you could always blame policy. I think that's something where you just it's policy, it's not me. And, and if they want to talk to our office, I hope that, you please encourage them. We're always happy to talk to faculty. We just met with a faculty person earlier today, and we had a really good conversation and resolved it with them. And I think the faculty was very pleased. He walked away feeling like, okay, he understood, he knew what he had to do, and he knew he had somebody. So we really enjoy and appreciate those interactions, because we do want, I know we're technically in a compliance office, but we do want to make sure that faculty understands that we are also a resource for them, that we are here to support them, that we want their research to go forward. We are not trying to be a roadblock and just give them extra paperwork. I'm sure these are things you hear complaints about, but really we're trying to protect them. We're trying to protect the university, and we really, we encourage them to come to us with questions. And so if there is a question or an issue, and if you think that our office might handle it better, you can say, here I'm going to involve our, the COI office, who can, really answer your question. And, and we're happy to be that office and take on that responsibility, so that you aren't put in that awkward situation of having to kind of defend our policies. If it's to that point where they're just not going to listen to you, feel free to direct them our way.
And to add to what Alaisha's just saying, I actually received the table from you, Susan, and the table was good. It's just that our forms are designed, they have a series of questions for each entity. So the table might be concise, but we also have these forms, and they're designed in such a way that protects the university, protects the professor. So it's a really important, I mean, as much as it seems like it's a lot of PDF work, it's really important these forms are filled out completely. Thank you.
Thank you, Brandon. We have a question. So if the requirements are slightly different for the different funding agencies, you also mentioned that UCB encourages full disclosure of everything. Should we just encourage that highest level of disclosure regardless of funding agency?
Yes and no. I mean, obviously, I think disclose whatever is appropriate, but I think there are sometimes faculty, do want to feel, may have some comfortableness issues about disclosing everything. But I think also then, gets to that extra paperwork. And I think sometimes that's where we see faculty where, I know I want to protect them from saying, you have to fill this out. Although I will say, we don't know which way the winds will blow. We don't have an electronic system, but potentially if we did have one, it might be where they, ideally in the perfect world where, and we see a lot of universities do this, where there's just one big giant annual disclosure for everybody, and you're just disclosing everything, and disclosing for all those projects in which and that may end up being how it gets reviewed. So at that point, everything really would be being reviewed. But I think for right now, because we don't have that electronic system, I think we do try to not force faculty to fill out forms that they might not have to, or go through a review process that might not be necessary.
Yeah, that would be nice to have that centralized, but I think it's a dream. Do you think it's something that has to happen on federal level, or it's not something we could do on our level, or like universities?
Well, allegedly there had been a conversation that they were going to come up with a form, and I had to laugh because I unfortunately couldn't make there was a COI conference in which NSF and NIH were like, oh yeah, like, yeah, we've like been talking and we were like 85% similar. And everybody in the COI world was like looking at them like they had three heads, because it was, what are you talking about? You're similar maybe in terms of like, like requirements for current and pending support, or, biosketch information. The COI disclosures are obviously very different. And it is interesting because that is something that has come up in the federal government, along with some of the regulations like NSPM 33, where they are asking for more uniformity across the board. And they're asking for more agencies to actually also be included. And potentially this is why DOE has a new policy. I don't know if we are going to see other agencies. You never know what might happen. And if that does, potentially will we see a more streamlined version of, of a form? That would be great. But, well, one can always hope.
All right. Are there any other questions? Feel free to unmute yourself if you need any clarification, maybe, or suggestion. All right. Susan, I'll let you do the rest of it if we don't have any more questions. Or Kate.
Alaisha, are we willing to say anything COI related? Since we have time.
What were you thinking? I'm like happy to share.
Well, just any like open forum questions, Q&A.
Oh, no, yeah, sure.
Yeah,
Obviously,
anything COI related, anybody? Anything you're working on?
I'd love to hear if there's any system or form or process updates that are going to be happening in the next year or two, if there's anything.
I think we're definitely looking at that. I know, with, I don't know if I think Brian's on here, that, we have a new director of research ethics and compliance. And we're definitely, now that we have him, I think it's definitely going to be one of his goals. I know is, we're evaluating our processes, trying to look at process improvement. So it's definitely possible that we could see some changes. In terms of forms, I don't know how much the forms would change unless potentially we did get an electronic system. The forms are kind of pretty standard. They collect the agency specific information. I think we might see some process changes, maybe like with Phoebe. I know it'd be great. And I know something that has been talked about, like with our Phoebe is, putting out reminders, or, using that more for like messaging and alerts, things like that. So, it's very possible that you will see some process changes, hopefully improvements, hopefully maybe some more stuff that's electronic that would make our lives easier, hopefully. So it's I think it's kind of going to be one of those wait and see. And obviously if we do, we'll have announcements and present at RAC Forum, and you guys will hear about it. So.
Yeah, if I can just jump in for a second. Thank you, Alaisha. And also thank you, Brandon, both of you for the presentation. Great job. As far as processes and procedures go, we're really at the beginning stage of just sort of revetting what it is we're doing. And there's going to be, I think, considerable outreach and engagement to the wider community and to many of you, and feel free to reach out with your thoughts. We're also in the process of having communications with our partners at other UC locations to really sort of benchmark what they're doing. What do they do well? What maybe could we learn from what they're doing? But everything ultimately has to be properly vetted and considered in light of what is appropriate for Berkeley. So we're just really in that beginning stages right now.
And I've said it before at the RAC Forum, I just love the fact that we can do the 700U form through DocuSign, through Phoebe, and I've told the Phoebe guys, I know they worked very long and very hard to make that happen, and what an improvement. It's just really, really nice.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when I had to go back and collect 700Us because they didn't have blue ink. I mean, it was kind of ridiculous. So this is, yeah, it's, the Phoebe team is amazing, and you know, they've done so much, and I think, you know, more things like that that help our process would be wonderful. If there's other things, that would be great. Yep, see more people singing their praises. See, I know they really, you know, I think it definitely, you know, love fest for them. It's,
yeah, and the addition of the 700U for gift, that was recent. That was
yeah, I know.
Difference.
That's another thing that hopefully should be making life easier. So.
Yeah.
Well, Kate, I think you were going to do the wrap up, right?
Yeah, just throwing, you know, if there's anything else, Alaisha, it sounded like you were open to having more specific questions if anybody has.
Sure. And also to put out there, if somebody doesn't want to ask it in this for them, you know, Brendan and I are here to, like we said, we're resources to faculties, we're resources to you guys as well. Please reach out anytime if you have questions. There's COI team email address. Reach out to us, or directly if you had a question, if you want to address one of us directly to our personal emails, that works too. But otherwise, you know, we want to help you the best way we can. If you think you have a faculty that's having issues and you want to just discreetly mention it to us, you know, obviously we won't say anything to you, but we're here. We won't point out your name, but we can figure out a way how to, you know, address it if there's something you wanted to share with us offline. You know, we're here to support you guys as well. So.
And I can say from experience that that is very true, that you guys are very, very approachable, which is something I truly appreciate, because we don't always know the answers, and you know the PIs are going to ask us first.
Yes. And so, and again, if you are dealing with a difficult PI, you know, feel free to, you know, and you feel like you can't really be the voice, feel free to let us know, because it is our compliance area. It's our responsibility. We can be the bad guys for you if you need us to be, to get them to comply.
And if I could offer one more consideration, if anyone is interested in additional training or personalized training, or someone from your team that didn't make today's session, we're certainly happy to continue the outreach and present for smaller groups on, you know, at your convenience. So that's out there as well.
Yeah.
I have a question kind of in general, because I've been far removed from frontline RA for many years. So in terms of annual disclosure, PIs are responsible for disclosing annually. So let's say they have a new DOE award that's, you know, that is awarded as a 3-year project. And so we're not going to be receiving increments of funding or amendments. How do they get, are they responsible for submitting the forms, or are they reminded, or how does that actually work? I know PHS has had that for a long time as well.
Yeah, and I think I may ask Sabina to chime in here as well, because usually it's, we rely on SPO to kind of be that reminder, because generally annually, you know, at least with NIH, I know they're collecting forms, like they're reminding them about the reports being due, the annual report being due, things like that. So usually they are kind of that trigger to remind them, like, hey, faculty, it's been, you know, your year is here. You need to also submit your disclosure forms. And I believe they also at that time submit the screening question form, which is that check of, have you added anybody? Are there new faculty? Is there any, you know, suddenly, you know, if they had been negative, do you suddenly have an interest and need to start disclosing? So Sabina, I'll let you kind of.
And each time COI sends a letter, we include that in our letter, the reminder.
Yeah.
I do want to chime in on SPO's end. Being a CGO, I know we have a lot of RAs here, so this is a great opportunity for me. And I know for all of the CGOs at SPO is to alert RAs that, unfortunately, when your SPO CGO is reaching out to you and asking for PHS of COI, it's a bit too late, because that means we already have an award, and the process of review will take a week or so. And it actually would be great if whenever you see communication from us or directly from a PI, like, here's the JIT, I've received the JIT, I need to work on it. You know that the award is coming. Please send your PHS forms to, or any other DOI, COI forms to COI team so that they can start working on it. Because once you hear from SPO CGO, it's a bit too late. It will delay the award for another week minimum.
What about for the annual disclosures? Are SPO CGOs keeping track of all of their awards and sending out reminders annually?
No, it all is the same thing. So the moment the award comes in and it shows up on SPO CGO's whiteboard, we know that the award is actually here, or the amendment for incremental funding. That's when, before we process, we actually have to make sure that you're compliant. And that's when we will be asking, hey, I've received an award. Do you have your COI straightened out? Can you send us the forms? But that means the award or an amendment to award is already with us and it's waiting to be released to the department.
On that point also, Sabina, it goes through you guys, right? You guys forward it to COI, because if you don't get it, then you're kind of held up. So it should go to you and then you forward it, right? Okay.
Or you can directly send it to COI team Berkeley.edu. Is that the email, right, for the disclosures?
Yeah, and if we receive it and we see that the proper forms are not submitted, we will go ahead and, in certain cases, respond and try to get it from the PI.
Yeah. I've had instances where I would receive approval right away from COI team, and I didn't get to the award yet. So that means the RA is already working with COI and things are moving. And it's really always great news because we can just quickly process the award.
So it sounds like PHS, NIH generally awards in annual increments. DOE sometimes awards, and I guess maybe it's more common with contracts which are not subject to this than it is for cooperative agreements or grants, but they can award in more than a one-year increment. How are we planning to, if we do, for example, have a phase 1 award that's 18 months, what is the expectation for the folks in this room in each of our different roles in terms of reminding the PI after that year 1, if there's no award action that prompts us? How are we supposed to, or what's the expectation in terms of getting the updated form annual disclosure from the PI?
Well, so I would be surprised if we did have that requirement and something like that, where they would input those requirements. Because like you said, it is generally financial assistance agreements is not really something you're going to see in the contract. So usually they are going to be something that is going to be, but on the off chance that there would be, I think what I would advise would be, if it does get funded, that, just contact our office so that we can kind of be put on alert, and then we can work with you on like a solution about how do we ensure that we are in compliant with this. Because, is it, because I understand, with RAs, especially, changing roles or being assigned to different units potentially, that maybe the RA may not be there next year. They might be working with a different faculty. So I think alerting our office would be what I would suggest, is like, let us know, say, hey, we have this weird one-off. It's not going to have an annual reporting requirement, but it still has these disclosure requirements. So we want to make sure, how can we catch this? And then we will figure something out. We'll work with your office. Because I think that's always, would be my default answer, is if there's something weird or one-off, and just let us know, contact us. We'll help you figure it out and do our best to figure out what seems like the best solution at the time for the situation.
There's a question that came in directly. It says, is the COI the same as NSF COA spreadsheet? We also submit non-PHS and PHS forms when submitting proposals, but those are different. I would say yes. I mean, I will let you guys answer that, but yes, the forms are different for...
The COI screening question form, it does group NSF, PHS together, but they're two separate forms. They just happen, when you download it, they happen to be in the same file. I think that's what the person's asking. If not, please correct me.
Okay.
Yeah, actually, there's a third. We added the DOE to the
And we
screening
added
form.
DOE.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so it's just kind of, we just have one basic screening form.
Right.
And it's, it's just try as a catch-all so that we didn't have to have 3 separate forms. It was just fill out the screening form it's supposed to be for the appropriate funder. I know sometimes we see them not filling out the correct section. But as long as hopefully the answers are correct.
And also recall that we have the screening questions in the Phoebe proposal record that PIs certify when they answer yes or no. So some of those answered right at the time when you submit the Phoebe proposal record in Phoebe. So no form is needed, thank God for that. I guess you do need to follow up with more details if it is positive, if the answer is yes. There's a question, sorry if this has already been answered, but how do we handle COI for an award where the prime is NIH but the lead is an NGO? Does the PI need to complete a COI 700U for the NGO since the funds will flow through the nonprofit before coming to us? That's a good question.
Yes, it does. Generally, you have to submit both because NIH still has the requirements for subawards, but then the state of California still requires that 700U disclosure when you're receiving funding for research. So that's a situation where you would have to submit both forms.
I have another question. For phase 1 SBIR STTRs, there's a difference in requirements for NIH and PHS, right? Where we don't have to fill out the initial.
So for phase 1, generally, yes, we will require the 700U.
Yes.
We may not require the PHS form. Sometimes, however, if there's one where it can be a phase 1 and 2, we might ask for it because otherwise when that annual review comes up, we may not have realized that we did not, so potentially if it's one of those where it's definitely like phase 1 only, we would say we don't need to do it. But if it's one of those that has that phase 1 and 2 combined, we would say yes. At that point, we would probably want it at phase 1 as well. But it's going to be specific to that.
Yeah.
That FOA.
So for phase 1s for NSF and PHS, generally we don't need it, but we still have the screening questions in Phoebe automatically anyway. So does DOE have the same requirement for SBIR STTRs?
I believe they've pretty much copied the PHS language for most of their policies. So my guess is yes, I believe so. Although I'm pretty sure that it's pretty much the exact same. So I think that would be the same situation where for phase 1 you would not need that form, just the 700U.
Thank you.
Good question.
And again, to clarify, so for people, those are for SBIRs and STTRs. That would be the only exception about when it's a phase 1 SBIR STTR. You do not have to submit your PHS forms, but you do have to submit the 700U. So, but that's exclusive to those type of fundings.
And just for clarification, in case you haven't worked with those, SBIRs are small business innovation research grants or contracts or cooperative agreements, and STTRs are small business tech transfer. And what those are is federal funds. It's a specific pot of federal funds that small businesses can apply for. And then they can partner with the university and subaward a portion of that to us for us to do part of that work.
Yeah, and actually I think it's even a requirement that they have like 30% go out to like a research institution. So a lot of times we will see that those are ones that are conflicted because a lot of times it's the faculty's company and he's submitting, subawarding to us. So those generally are ones where we do see a lot of COI disclosures.
Yeah, for the STTRs, it is required. I think for SBIR phase 1, it's not, but I think it changes with the various phases for each of those different categories. One last call for questions. And if there are no more questions, I want to say a big thank you to Brandon and Alaisha We super appreciate you coming to Bragg. I know you're part of this community, and so we really like having you here. This is a great presentation for us. I'm going to put the survey in the link. Please, everyone, take a minute to fill it out. We're always looking for topics that you're interested in. And so, yeah, we look forward to hearing from you, and we'll see you at our next meeting, which we will announce over email. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.